Welcome to the Petersen's Bowhunting Podcast. All bow hunting, all the time. Now, here's your host, Associate Editor Mark Demko.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Bowhunting Podcast. I'm super excited today. We have a special guest, Mike Callas from Michigan. If you see behind Mike, there's an incredible buck there, and he has an incredible story we're going to talk about here in just a minute. Mike, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're pretty excited. When you reached out to us and you talk about this deer, you gave us the lowdown. It was pretty impressive. Not only is that a huge deer going over 200 inches, you took it on public land, probably in one of the best whitetail hunting states in the country, Iowa, but it's not every day. There's a lot of people that travel from out of state. For example, you went from Michigan to Iowa and took a really big buck. There's a lot of people who like to travel, take really good quality deer. Not a lot of bow hunters have a chance to go out and take a 200-inch buck, especially on public land. So, living in Michigan, do you have a chance to bow hunt out of state a lot? Do you travel a lot during the course of the year, or have you over the past, say, 15 or 20 years?
So the last 10 years, I've really taken an interest in the out-of-state hunt. I try to get out of state probably 1 to 2 weeks a year. Michigan just doesn't offer up quality deer like these, even young quality deer are just really hard to come by in my area. So it's fun to get out and try to chase some of these big bruisers. And like I said, the last 10 years, I've really taken an interest in it and been fairly successful.
Awesome. So what are some of the states you've hunted outside of Iowa? What are some of the states you've done some hunting in?
I've done some hunting in Ohio. I started in Ohio. It was close and cheap. And then I expanded down to Kentucky, Nebraska, and then Iowa this year. So far, I've got a couple more on the bucket list. I'm going back to Nebraska this year. Actually, I'm going to try to draw a Kansas tag and Nebraska for the 2022 season. So see where my tag falls.
So this was your first trip out to the Hawkeye States, the first time you've been to Iowa?
It was, yep. It was a 4-year in the making deal, right? Because obviously, if you want to go archery, it takes some time to acquire the reference points to get into a desirable zone.
Yeah, and I know it's something where you have the draw, and it's going to take you 3 or 4 years, depending, to draw that tag. So I'm sure you were pretty excited when you got the notification this year.
Oh, very, very much so. It's kind of funny because it seems like everybody tries to chase those zones 4, 5, and 6. I'll disclose it was not in one of those hot areas. And I had some buddies that had been to Iowa, and they were kind of mocking me, like, "Oh my goodness, you're wasting your preference points. You're not holding out for one of the good areas." So, I mean, I can only imagine what I could have turned up if I would have went to one of the good areas.
So that's actually a great starting point on the story. So you live in Michigan. You spent a couple of years putting in for the points. You drew the tag this year. How did you start narrowing down where you wanted to hunt in the state? Obviously there are a lot of different options, but you were looking specifically at doing a public land DIY hunt. How do you start narrowing down your options?
I mean, for me, it's all about, I leverage my online mapping. I mean, Onyx is a great tool. I have no affiliation with them, but I don't know if, I've got a lot of tools in my back pocket that I think, short of some trail camera help and Onyx and just knowing your boundaries and available land to hunt. There's also great publications or websites, right? In all your out of state, all your different states. I mean, Nebraska's got some good stuff I've already been looking at for next year's season. But anyways, they really detailed the accessible lands for the public. So Onyx really helped me narrow down what was available, how much land. And then I follow a lot of people, a lot of YouTubers, a lot of do-it-yourselfers. Dan Infalt has been, I've really modeled myself around his means of hunting. Obviously, everybody knows the hunting public. I respect them a lot. I have a little bit more respect for Dan Infalt just because he's been doing this since long before it was cool. So he's in it for the challenge. So I just follow their tactics. I try to get away from people, and I try to just keep an open mind. But crop rotation, my experience with deer, coming from Michigan, I will say in this particular hunt, I definitely focused on some areas with some standing corn because I thought big bucks in Michigan flee to standing corn when they get pressured. And So I looked for that. That was the first thing I looked for, and little pinches and draws that these deer would get forced into. Because Michigan's got small sections of corn, little 40, 60, 80 acre plots of corn. We go out there and you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acres linked together, square miles linked together. So when that all comes off, the living space for these deer, I mean, it really just shrinks down so much that that was my focus. When I was going out there knowing that I was going to be there for an early rut hunt.
And is it something where you tried to identify several different management areas or several different locations within the zone? I mean, how'd you go about picking out a couple, shall we say, hotspots?
So I started from where I was entering the state from east to west. I started picking a handful of properties I wanted to visit. So I went about 3 weeks. I wanted to let some trail cameras soak for about 3 weeks so I could get a little bit of an inventory as to what I was after. Because I had, once again, relying on my buddies in a state that not many of us have hunted. It's, you're going to Iowa, land of the giants. I didn't want to hold out for 170 if I couldn't, if that wasn't a realistic goal. I don't want to hunt a ghost. I like to bring deer home when I go. So I wanted to just shoot the best caliber deer that I thought were possible. I wanted to shoot maybe a top 3 deer that I could locate on camera. And I really wanted to be able to hit the ground running. So I visited on, I think, October 14th, 15th or so. I visited over the course of 3 days, like a dozen different properties. I just did a solo scouting mission by myself, and I took a dozen trail cameras, and I tried to get a couple of cameras in several different properties to get a little bit of inventory.
Awesome. And so is it safe to assume you're using cell cams?
I had some cell cameras. So I had like 6 cell cameras and then 6 traditional cameras. So I tried to get 1 cell cam and 1 traditional in pretty much every piece of property I had. And I tried to kind of bury the cell cameras a little deeper in because I didn't know if people would mess with them if they came across them, or I didn't know what to think. And they got a little bit more value to them.
Yeah. So you went out in advance, you did a little bit of scouting, you put some cameras out. Now it's time to go out and hunt. What was the week that you chose to head out there and do your hunting?
So I had reserved, I had planned on going out like November 2nd through the 15th. I had roughly 2 weeks. There was a guy that I worked with that had applied with me. So it was a buddy hunt. We were planning to go out together. I ended up adjusting my plans a little bit because I had this deer behind me show up a couple days before Halloween. So I was really anxious to get out there. I was just a little hung up because I've got a couple young boys and we had Halloween night coming, and I couldn't sell them out for not even for a 200-inch deer. So I had to patiently wait after getting this guy on camera.
Yeah. So you obviously answered one of my questions. You sort of knew he was in the area you were going to hunt.
I did. It was really quite painful, right? So this deer, at the time I didn't realize it, but when I had hung cameras, the very first camera I hung, the very first area I liked, I'd seen a really tall rub, and it was shredded and it was snapped off at about chest high. And I thought, man, that's got to be a brute. I need to see this deer. And I really didn't think that this deer would be in that location based on, there was a river that I had to cross, so that made access a little bit more difficult for people, but I just thought it was just too close to access. I thought, I don't know. But I thought, well, it's okay. If I get a midnight photo of the deer, that it's good enough. It'll show me what's here. So I hung a camera on a little side trail of that. And I killed the deer right at that camera location, 2.5 weeks later. And he actually appeared on my other non-cell camera the next evening after I'd hung the camera. He stuck his snout right up in the front of the camera. I didn't realize it was him because I'd only got a glimpse of some of the brow tines. I thought, geez, I'm not sure what buck that is, but yeah, it was the anticipation was killing me when I first got a good clear photo of this deer. I just knew what a deer. I mean, I was nervous to think that I was going to get to hunt a deer like this.
So, were you worried that anybody else might be onto that deer? Obviously, it's public land. Not as heavily hunted as, say, Michigan or Pennsylvania, but there's, still an opportunity that others were aware of that. Or any thoughts on that? I mean, is that something that crossed your mind at some point?
Absolutely. So the biggest issue I had is I started doing a little bit of research, and I had flushed a lot of pheasant when I was out there, and I didn't realize that pheasant season came in the weekend of Halloween weekend. Well, I had some other trail cameras relating some CRP edges and things like that, and they just got loaded up. They got loaded up with bird hunter presence. I hadn't had any issues with bow hunters. I didn't have a single hunter on camera until the Saturday night. I had my first bow hunter on a different property, drag a deer out past one of my cameras. I couldn't see what it was, but I woke up at like 3 a.m. for some reason and noticed I had some cell camera notifications. Rolled over, took a look at them, and went, "Oh no, somebody's on there." Well, it wasn't until in the morning I realized, "Oh, thank goodness, it's not the property where this deer was." But yeah, I was a little paranoid to say the least. There's so many factors working against you on public lands.
Yeah, and did you have other decent bucks on camera, at least in that location that you were going to hunt?
At this location. This was the only deer I wanted to kill, so it actually worked out great because I said if any Boone and Crockett quality deer presented itself, I was likely going to take him, no matter, even knowing I had this giant on camera. I'm on short time, and it's hard to pass a Booner if you get one. I did have some other deer that I think probably would have grossed into the 170s. I had a couple of them that were right there. I actually jumped one out of his bed when I was scouting, and I almost tried to make a bump and dump scenario on him when I was scouting. And I hung a camera back on his about 30 yards from his bed. The next night I had him coming back out of there again. So it would have been quite interesting. I've never felt so happy to not set up on a 170 class deer for fear I would have killed him. It would have taken this opportunity away. So just crazy, right?
Yeah, it's an absolutely wonderful thing to have to worry about. That's incredible. So you got out there, then you knew this deer was there. You had him on camera. When you arrived, did you hunt that night? Did you hunt the next day? Walk us through the actual hunt itself. When you left, when you got there, and how this all transpired.
So I wasn't supposed to travel until Tuesday the 2nd because that worked best for my hunting partner. Despite we were going to drive separate, I thought, we'll just wait and go out together and just be safe. It's foreign place, hunting by yourself, nobody to help you. I don't know if I'm going to have cell service in all these areas. I just didn't want, just playing safe, being a family guy and all. But after getting photos of him on the previous Thursday evening, right after dark, he was coming back from the little creek bottom, and there was a cornfield adjacent to there that had been cut. I suspected he'd come out of a bedding location, hit the cornfield, and then was coming back to me. And he was just after dark. So I was really amped up thinking, oh my goodness, like this deer is killable. He was moving in the daylight. He's so big. I mean, I figured, 180 to 200, let's say. I didn't want to say that to my buddies because some of them just say, yeah, I'm not sure. How do you even put a number to that? Right. But then the next morning I was at work, and at 8:15, I get back to camp, and I open it up, and he's standing in front of my camera facing away. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm in his wheelhouse. Like, I got this deer an hour after daylight, just standing there. I said, I got to get out. I got to get out there as soon as I can. I got to get after this deer before somebody kills him. And so Monday morning, which was the day after Halloween, November 1st, I left my house here at like 2 a.m. And I got to my zone a little bit after 10 in the morning, 10:30. So I mean, I may have been pushing the speed limits a little bit to get there. But I had a handful of cameras I wanted to check, and I wanted to pull some other stuff because I just planned on hunting the evening, and I wanted to get in there good and early. But I was there so early, I actually afforded myself enough time to stop at 2 different properties and pull 4 cameras. And then I still had enough time to get out there. I think I sat in my truck and kind of killed a half hour, 45 minutes, ate some snacks, and kind of got my stuff around, took my time before I headed on off to chase this brute.
So you actually hunted that night when you got there. And now, what were you using? Were you using a climber? Did you have a hang-on stand? Are you a saddle hunter?
I'm a little bit traditional, right? So I'm an old school lone wolf guy. I've got a lone wolf lock on with lone wolf sticks, and then I've got a lone wolf hand climber. This particular deer, I thought he was bedding on there was kind of I don't want to say it's hill country, but we had probably a ridge up off this creek bottom that was 150 foot uphill. And I thought he was bedding up on top of this. I had seen a little bit of a rub line in mid-October coming down off there, but I thought he was up there bedding and coming down to the cornfield at night. So as you got up on the hillside a little bit, there was big timber, and I thought I was going to cheat that. I thought I was going to try to cheat him coming off that hillside. So I elected to take my lone wolf hand climber in that night because I figured I'd be up on, the river bottom flat was better for a lock on, but the hillside was better to get high with the climber. So I ended up taking the climber.
Yeah. Now, hypothetical here, but say you wouldn't have had this great success on the first night. What was your strategy going to be for the morning hunts, or weren't you going to hunt in the morning?
No. It was rut. So no, I was definitely not giving up on this deer. I had a strategy. So depending on what I saw, my level of confidence was very, very high that I was going to see this deer. The way that the property set up, I thought if he comes off this hillside at all or runs this creek bottom, I'm going to get eyes on him. So I was going to wait and see how that first hunt went and then make some adjustments. But when I walked in that day, and I'll tell you, just my years of hunting pressured whitetails, it helped that I knew that I was in the deer's bedroom. If I wouldn't have had a cell camera, I wouldn't have been so cautious going into the woods. But I really take my time. I mean, I can't even say I killed this deer probably 900 yards from my truck, but I had to cross a creek bottom, and I got a little wet with knee-high boots going across. And a few days earlier, we had a good rainstorm, and that might have been a blessing because I could see on my cell camera when I got some pictures, the water was up 4 or 5 feet in the back, 4 or 5 feet higher than it normally is. You could see it rushing in the background since my camera happened to be pointing at it. And that may have saved this deer for me. Otherwise, this deer was known. There was a neighbor guy that he owns a very large swatch of land, and he was parked the next day. My buddy checked out the property again. He was going to go back in, and he saw the neighbor guy come out of his private land, his 1,000 acres of private land in Iowa, and drive around to where I parked to pursue this deer. So he was well aware of this deer, and this deer had a broadhead mark in its right shoulder, which I couldn't see. So he had already been hit this year as well.
Luck played a factor in this as well.
So I don't know if that guy pushed him off, or I thought maybe the deer had been battling with another deer. That was one of the factors that helped me pick this property was the neighboring property. I thought the guy looked like he was a very dedicated bow hunter, and anybody with just by looking at his property and the way it was set up, I could just tell he probably wasn't shooting small deer, and any of his runovers would have been very, very desirable for me to have as a non-resident.
Yeah. Well, thank you for going through all of that. And obviously you put a lot of work in ahead of time, but now let's get to the meat of this. So you climb in that stand on the first night. Walk us through what happened.
So, I'll go back to this. So I leave the truck. I walk kind of quickly for the first couple hundred yards, and I get to the creek. After I hit the creek, I probably only had to go another 300 yards. That took me nearly an hour to cover that 300 yards. And I took a dried up creek bottom. Like there was an oxbow on the creek. And had I not, this deer ended up not coming off the hillside. He came off the oxbow. From the dry creek bed to the tip of the oxbow was like 130 yards. So at any given time, he was no more than 130 from me because he was bone dry. He did not come off. He did not cross that creek. So if I wouldn't have went so slow, I was able to get up in my climber, and he never. I mean, I always take my time. So once I picked my tree, when I got to my camera location, I was going to push on past that was my plan, and up the hillside a little bit, and then I could see the rub line coming out of there, and I could see how bad he'd been thrashing this. I thought this deer's likely just been dancing around my camera since I left. He's been in here. So I said, I'm going to sit just off the camera here at the first good tree I can get that I can still shoot to the creek bottom and pinch him in between there. Those creek bottoms out there have real steep banks, so they really have to pick their cross points. So they can't just, it's not like a ditch in your front yard or something. They don't just jump through wherever they want. They have to pick, they have to go 50 or 100 yards before their next crossing. So the likelihood of a deer just, if they're coming along it more often than not, that creek bottom will really funnel them to you. So I snuck in there. I picked my tree. I took my time, and I waited on. I only went up on wind gusts, and I just, I don't let any metal on metal clang. And I got up in the tree about 25 feet, and once everything got quiet, I had a couple branches I wanted to kind of move out of my way. A couple dead branches that were hanging by me, and I took that time to break one off, and then I did a little rattle sequence, and then I got sitting kind of tight. So I probably sat there 10 minutes. I did a quick rattle sequence, broke off a little branch, and it was 15 minutes later. I was surprised to see him turn the corner out of the creek bottom, coming right to me. So he closed the distance. Wind was marginal at best for that location. He was supposed to, in my opinion, was supposed to come from the opposite direction. I don't know if it was bird hunters that got the best of him. I can't imagine why a mature deer would have been bedding down there. But now looking back, saying, he was injured. At the time, I thought I seen him limping a little bit, but not to the point where I thought he had been shot or anything like that. But he come up out of the oxbow perfect when he turned the corner. I mean, he was only 25 yards. He was going to try to pinch between me and the creek, and there was only 20. Me to the creek was only 20 yards away at that point, and he was kind of pushing underneath some, I don't know if they were red brush or what. I can't even remember now, but he opted. I thought he was going to come in between me and the brush, and he decided to go underneath of it. And at that time, I knew I just checked the wind a few minutes prior, and I floated a couple of milkweed seeds, and they were going right to it. So I was pretty nervous, and I sent one down through the brush there at about 12 yards, and down he went. So that was it was unbelievable. I can't even. I mean, still to put words to it now, it's still hard to believe. You tell people, but I'd only been on stand. I think I texted my buddy 28 minutes after I had gotten on stand and told him I just killed the giant. So just unbelievable how it came together.
Well, congratulations. That's an incredible deer. Now, what are the official specifications? What did it score? What did it gross? What did it net?
So after the official drying period, he grossed 212 inches and 6/8, and he will net 206 is what we submitted to Boone & Crockett Pope & Young for certification.
Yeah, and how many points? How many scoreable points?
21 scoreable points.
It's an awesome deer, and I've got to ask. I don't think I could keep my nerve. How did you keep your composure when that deer was closing the distance from 30 to 25 to 20?
It all comes out. It all comes down to muscle memory. I don't usually. I mean, we've chatted a little bit before, so I've shot some respectable deer, especially for short time out of state hunts. But this year had me a little sideways. If I didn't have good muscle memory, I don't know, because it was kind of was a blur. I knew I had the deer on camera. I knew what deer he was. And when I first got a glance, the first thing I saw was that drop time. So I knew what deer he was. And I just thought, oh my goodness, this is coming together. It was probably 10 to 15 seconds from the time I saw the deer till I sent an arrow. And that's probably how I held it together, to be honest with you. I mean, had I never seen the deer before, I could have, I'll take a glance at it and say, yep, that's a shooter. That's the deer I want to. But just knowing I had studied this deer, I got nervous the first time I got a trail camera picture of the deer. So I don't know. I can't tell you how I kept it together, but hence I hit him a little high on a 12-yard shot. I can blame it on the brush, but I think I own most of that. I think that was on me for the high shot. So, but that's what happens when you get a 200-inch bruiser in front of you.
Well, you have them, so it was a good shot. Now you mentioned the broadhead. What were you using as far as equipment? What was your bow? What was your arrow? What was your broadhead?
So I shoot a Bowtech Rain. I think it's a 2017. It's a Bowtech Rain 6. Great bow. It's got the smoothest draw cycle I've ever experienced. So that's why I bought the bow years ago and haven't looked for a new one since. Broadheads, I took a chance. I kind of got away from. I had been doing a little bit of research on all this new thing with the ranch fairy and the increased FOC. You can pick on shoulders. This thing blows through bone. You can do all these things with, you don't. I was trying to get to more of like a fixed blade broadhead and get away from the mechanical. So this year I tried a Muzzy hybrid, which was the Muzzy Trocon in a 125 grain. and I had dialed up some weight on the front end of my arrows, hoping for that extra penetration in case I happen to maybe hit one. I think it did the trick. It did. I got a little bit of bone on this one, and it put him down, and I was very satisfied with what it did.
Yeah, well, again, that's an incredible deer, and obviously your equipment did the job. So, was there anything as you were putting this whole trip together to Iowa that surprised you, maybe about the hunting there or the experience? Did anything? Was there ever an aha moment where you thought, "Wow, I never thought of this," or you know what I mean?
So it's funny. Here in Michigan, we call maybe I'm giving up too much here for anybody else, but I shouldn't say giving up too much. I'm happy to share the story and anything that'll help anybody get on a deer of a lifetime, whatever that trophy may be. But here in Michigan, we get our October wall. Well, that October wall is, in my opinion, it's from all the pressure that the influx of pressure from the youth hunt, and then the first wave of bow hunters hitting the field. Like I said, I never had any hunters on trail camera until the weekend of the pheasant season, and then November 1. I think everybody decided, it's time to go deer hunt. It's time to go hunt something. It's time to get in the woods. So that pressure out there, I would say it's a November wall. A lot of my deer that were very patternable. Let's put it this way: every good buck I had was killable between that, basically the middle of the 20, basically the October 23rd to October 28th. I had every big buck I had on camera, I had in daylight, and was very killable. Thereafter, these deer got, whether it was the rut, the influx of pressure, just relocation of everything, but things got shook up. So out there, I feel like they have a November wall. The rut chasers really mess with them. The bird hunters really mess with them. Until then, nobody. I don't know why nobody was out there chasing deer. They had amazing deer, very, very killable, very visible, and man, it went quiet early November. My buddy struggled. We struggled to get him out of decent deer, which he did connect with a Pope and Young quality deer eventually towards the end of the week. But it was not what we thought it was going to be based on how my hunt started and all the deer we had on camera.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. There's a lot of people don't get out there in that middle point of October as hard as they might do in those first couple of weeks in November. But there can be some really good activities, say that third or even going into that last week of October. And I saw the biggest buck I saw all season on. I was October 23rd. So it's interesting that you brought that up, because it's true. And then, here in Pennsylvania, obviously, much like Michigan, we have a lot of pressure from bow hunters. And then again, as the firearm season comes in, but you learn to adapt. Out there, you had a great strategy, and you ended up putting a nice buck down. Now, as somebody that's hunted out of state pretty often, and obviously you put everything you learned into practice this year with that incredible 200-inch whitetail. If you were going to share advice for somebody else who was looking to try and do an out-of-state, do-it-yourself public land hunt, where they're hoping to take, we won't say a Boone and Crockett caliber, really nice Pope and Young caliber buck, what's the first one or two things you would recommend for people as they're starting their research? How do you go and even try to put that puzzle together?
I think you gotta get boots on the ground. I used to do like my first couple hunts, I struggled. My Ohio hunt, I killed a nice deer. I killed a Pope and Young deer on public land in Ohio. But the next year I tried to come back and just hunt a little bit of history. I didn't give myself enough time to prepare. I didn't scout like I should. I wasn't ready to hit the ground running. When you show up, I think it's good to know what, it's good to know what you're after. And I mean, everything from hanging trail cameras to access points, drive around these areas, get eyes on them. I know it's hard if you're going out of state to be afforded even more time, especially if you have a family or a young family and wife. I mean, it's tough. I have to beg, borrow, and steal for every hour of time I get. But it's critical. I mean, if I wouldn't have got out there and got some boots on the ground and located this deer ahead of time, my hunt was botched if I didn't have, after the first 2 or 3 days. Fortunately, this deer happened to be in a big enough timber area with just a lack of pressure, just enough to where he was still in his core area at that time. Otherwise, everything else we had that was 160, 170 plus, I didn't get them back on. I got maybe one or two back on camera over the next 10 days while we were out there, and they were all at night. So they were completely displaced. So if you're not there ready to go on day one and take advantage, especially if your weather's bad, your best couple days may, if you're not ready to go, you're just cheating yourself. And I mean, it's hard because some people have to give up some at home hunting to do that, or, have to put in some extra, family time to get the spouse's good graces. But it is critical to get down there and get boots on it and see it real time, what it's going to look like in the near future. You can see real hot sign, and when you're doing that scouting without an actual hunting agenda, you're not worried about bumping a few deer. You can get in there and stink it up a little bit, because if you're on public land, guess what? Somebody's stinking that ground up a little bit. I mean, it's just, it's inevitable. So you just treat it like that, and you just want to learn as much as you can. But get out there ahead of time if you want good success. I don't care if success is that 110, 120, whatever success is. The more information you know about that present year is so important.
Now, I'm just curious, are you one of those hunters that likes to get deep in the woods? Will you look at maybe some of those overlooked properties, say public lands that might be 20, 50, 100 acres? Will you ever do some weird things like hunt fairly close to the road? The reason I ask is, I mentioned living here in Pennsylvania, we have some great public lands, but you can actually have some of your best success on really small parcels. So I was just curious, do you ever mix it up, or are you one of those guys that you always like to get really deep in the woods?
No, so out there, you're not really going to get deep in a lot of woods. I mean, there's a lot of little access points on these properties where I never felt like in the zone I was in, I didn't really ever feel like I could get that far away from somebody. If they wanted to get in there, they were no more than a mile away. It's pretty flat land. Like, it's very accessible. So you really have to look at the land and the features and think, what does it take? I mean, if you don't see any tire tracks at a parking area, it looks like it's been grown up and nobody's been there. Anything's viable. I mean, these deer don't like people, period, right? Big mature bucks don't like people. So if there's a lot of people in there, they're probably not, or they've, start thinking about an escape route. If people walk in here, what's the farthest point from here? But maybe you can still access that from another location. And, I mean, I was thinking outside the box. So I need to bring a boat back here. Do I, waders, hip boots? What do I need to do to get away from people to give myself the best chance at a less pressured, mature deer? But I mean, yeah, I definitely, the properties I had some of our best deer on were not your traditional whitetail properties. Everybody wants to go out there and hang a set and, on the edge of some cropland and good timber. Like, where I killed this deer was more of a, I don't want to say stereotypical, whitetail setup, but the other best deer I had on camera were only killable from a couple trees. And they were, some sparse, big CRP patches and things like that. And deer using little bluffs in a CRP field and accessing some adjacent cornfields. Most deer hunters wouldn't get caught dead there, to be honest with you. I mean, so the locals were completely overlooking those deer. And, and I bumped a 170 class deer 250 yards from the road. And that was, I told you a little bit about that deer. And I thought about setting up on that deer. And I mean, I could have killed him, and goodness, I could have killed him and see my truck. I mean, I could almost read my Chevy emblem on my truck at the time, right? I mean, that's how close I would have been. That deer was comfortable there because nobody messed with him there. So yeah, you never rule out anything until you get boots on the ground. You walk in there, you see big tracks and big rubs, and it's time to start investigating, right? If not, keep moving until you find that stuff. I mean, that's simple for me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a great strategy. Now, do you happen to have Iowa on your hit list again? Are you looking to get out there in 3 or 4 years again, if you can?
Yeah. Hard not to want to go back. And it's kind of funny with all my different experiences. I've learned to just really enjoy that. I like having spots and I like having areas. I hunt a little bit of like the same areas here in Michigan, just because access is limited because everybody hunts. But I don't even know if I'll end up back in the same zone. I kind of, and if I do, I'll definitely be pursuing that October 20th to 30th range more than I will the rut. Like I said, I think these deer, I think if I find one that I want at that time, I really think I can kill that deer I don't want to say easier than this one, but I would expect that I would get an opportunity. I didn't know how this was going to go.
Yeah, well, and that's why it's called hunting, or you know what I mean. It's you never know. It's a wild animal. You're battling the elements, the conditions. Anything and everything can happen. Fortunately, in your case, it all worked in your favor, and you put a lot of hard work in ahead of time. So, the other thing is you hunt you live in a state where you have a lot of hunters. Probably get a lot of hunting pressure even in bow season in Michigan. What part of the state do you live in Michigan?
I'm in the central lower peninsula. So I'm over by, I'm about even with the Saginaw Bay, if you're familiar with that part of Michigan.
I am. And so as you've started to hunt some of these other states, Ohio, Kentucky, now Iowa, and you've had a chance to take some really good quality deer, obviously topped off by this 200-inch bruiser. How has that maybe changed how you approach your bow hunting in Michigan? Or do you come at it from a different perspective, perhaps? Have you adopted anything that you maybe now use in your home state? Has anything changed?
No, so in my home state, I mean, everything's about inventory, right? So the property I have access to hunt, I just took good inventory of that property this year, and despite knowing that I was coming back from Iowa to spend quite a bit of time bow hunting now in Michigan, I didn't get a lot of October time because I did the quick trip to Iowa and was like I said, I was trying to keep the family happy. But I just gauged the area. I mean, good for my area and for my standards, I just set them and I go after that quality of deer, which is, I mean, typically, it's a top 2 or 3 deer in the area, and that's just it. Unfortunately, they're not even Pope and Young deer. I think I had 2 Pope and Young deer that I was interested in this year, and here in my area, and I didn't connect. And honestly, I never seen one from the deer stand, but that's common. I don't usually have Pope and Young deer that I even know about in my area that I have land access to. So it's tough. It's tough here.
Yeah. And obviously it's a scale. You sort of have to adapt to where you're hunting. We have the same thing in Pennsylvania. I had my sights set on one particular buck this year at my place. And fortunately, the only time it showed up was the night I had to take my daughter to a football game. She's in the band. And so that was the only time the deer showed itself. But, it's great when you have an opportunity to travel and hunt some of the other states, obviously the Midwest, the upper Midwest, and you ended up taking a hell of a deer there. So congratulations. That's an incredible buck. It's an incredible story. It's amazing how it all came together in that first sit. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for downloading the Petersen's Bow Hunting Podcast. All bow hunting, all the time. Pick up the latest issue of Petersen's Bow Hunting magazine on your local newsstand, or connect with us online at bowhuntingmag.com.